5th, 2022 meeting of the AMETS committee to order. We'll do the roll call. Mrs. Altel,
Present.
Mr. Dunbar,
They'll be up here shortly.
okay. Mr. Trombley. Here. Ms. Pokin.
Here.
We have a quorum. Aaron, will you do the public announcement, please?
Of course, all AMATS committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are first presented by a staff or consultant. After that, the committee is given an opportunity to ask questions. Once that is done, then it'll be open for public comment where the public is invited to formally comment. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic, and we will time it. A couple of housekeeping items. If you are joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn your camera off when you're not speaking on an item. If you're joining us by phone, to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Do we have any changes? Are there any objections to adopting the agenda? The agenda is approved. For agenda item 4, we have before us the minutes from the July 28th, 2022 for approval. Do we have a motion? Move to approve.
Second.
Any changes or discussions? Any objections to approving the minutes? Hearing none, the July 28th, 2022 minutes are approved. Moving on to action items. We have action item 5A, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue project closeout letter. Aaron, are you going to be presenting?
I'll give a quick presentation and then can turn it over to the project manager. So this is for a project that is currently in the TIP, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue project. It would be extending MLK Avenue from Elmore over to Tudor, Piper, somewhere in that area. During the development of this project, DOT found that there are considerable impacts that are not outweighed by the benefits this project would bring, and all would result in a no-build scenario for this project. As such, DOT is working with FHWA and coming to us, recommending that the project be closed out and no more additional funding be expended against this project. So that is what is before you today, is your support or recommendation, whatever you would like to make, to close out this project. And Noah King is here if you guys have any additional questions or if you'd like to speak, Noah.
And let the record show that Mr. Dunbar joined us at 1:40.
I don't have any, I think, yeah, I don't have any answer your question.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Any questions or comments from the committee? Okay. Are there any questions or comments by the public? All right, hearing none, what is the will of the committee? Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Trombley, second by Miss Zaltel. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Action item 5B, 2023 to 2026 TIP air quality conformity determination. Aaron, are you presenting on this one as well?
Yes, I am. Thank you. So as you all know, we've been working on the 2023 through 2026 TIP. And one of the requirements we have, since we are in a limited maintenance area, is to do an air quality conformity determination for projects that are in the TIP. What this air quality does is it reviews all the projects that are in the TIP to see if any of the projects will jeopardize continued implementation of any PM10 control strategies for the Eagle River PM10 maintenance area, nor will it undermine objectives or successful practices to managing PM10 emissions in the area. So this determination was developed through an interagency consultation process with DEC, AMATS, DOT, FHWA, EPA, and others. I'm sure I'm missing, but Matt Stitchett can help fill it in if need be. The interagency consultation team met on June 24th to review the contents of the draft conformity determination report and provided their support for the methods used in the development of the regional conformity determination for the TIP. The air quality conformity determination was released for a 30-day public comment period on July 1st and ended August 1st. No comments were received. It is before you today as the first item for the TIP because federal regulations require that an air quality conformity determination be approved before the TIP can be approved. And just a note, if changes are made to projects in the TIP that require an air quality conformity determination, such as non-exempt projects like roadway projects, we would have to go back and redo the air quality conformity determination and interagency consultation. So generally what happens is you get the air quality conformity determination approved, that sets the TIP, and you make no more changes to the TIP, and then you approve the TIP. That's all I have. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Okay, we're changing the order just a tad on this from here on out. So before we get to the committee, are there any comments from the public?
We do questions from the committee first, and then we go to the,
Okay. Are there any questions from the committee?
Yeah, I actually have a question.
Ms. Altel?
Thank you. Did you have a question too?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, is there at any point, so I've noticed, we've not had any air quality issues. We've been well within the federal standards since 1996. Is this a forever thing? Or does it ever go away because we're just doing so darn well?
I'll take a stab at this, and Matt, if I miss anything, please let me know. So back in the past, we did receive non-attainment status. And since then, we've been working diligently to ensure that we do better in our air quality. Once you receive non-attainment status, you can get out of non-attainment status through a 2 10-year cycles, so 20 years basically, of not having exceedances or a certain number of exceedances over a 3-year period. So basically, we've been doing well enough that we are in our last 10-year cycle soon for the PM10 in Eagle River. The one for the CO of Anchorage is almost done. I believe this is the last year for it, or next
It
year.
ends in July 2024.
Okay,
So
thank you.
At that point, we would no longer have to do a air quality conformity for PM10, but the one in Eagle River still applies for another 10-year plan.
Great.
And sorry, in terms of endless, doing the measures that are outlined in the state implementation plan that this talks about, those are endless.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes. Ms. Polkin?
So I wanted to clarify, is that automatic, that attainment after a certain period of time? Or is there some process and some communication and filings with EPA and that sort of thing that need to happen before there's a formal finding and the conformity requirements go away?
You are correct. My understanding is that is a lengthy process that has to be done. And then once the 10-year is reached, I believe you do have to follow up with EPA and other groups to confirm that you have meet that requirement before you can stop doing conformity analysis. So it'll be 10+ years before we ever have to stop doing conformity analysis. And I will mention any exceedances after that will put us back into non-attainment where we'll have to do pretty strict air quality conformity. Did that answer your question? I'm sorry, or if you have more.
And one other, are there any funding benefits or other sort of collateral consequences of that attainment or non-attainment status in terms of funding that go to the communities that have those, that are still under plans?
We do receive congestion mitigation and air quality for specific SIP measures, statewide implementation plan that help us meet that or limited maintenance, but to help us move us towards that non-attainment. I don't anticipate that changing any because we need to continue to do those measures to ensure that we don't fall back in non-attainment. I'm not sure if there's other funding outside of AMATS that would become eligible once we move out of the limited maintenance into the attainment. I would have to look that up, or if somebody else knows, they can let me know.
Any additional questions or comments from the committee?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Sure. So I apologize if I misunderstood what you said or I misheard it. You said that any change to the tip would require us to go back and redo this or someone to go back and redo this. Is there any distinction made between projects that would clearly improve our standing on these measures versus harm them? So I mean, if we are putting in a bike path, for example, that everyone believes will reduce, will reduce air pollution, does that still trigger this kind of
That's
analysis?
not, so that falls into a category of what's considered a conformity exempt project. So that would include studies, road rehabilitation, as long as there's no alteration of the road capacity or engineering design. And then non-motorized infrastructure is also exempt.
Can you state
State
your
your name
name?
for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry, Matthew Stitchick, Anchorage Health Department.
Thank you.
All these questions.
So I'll add on to that. One of the things to think about though, is in order to receive a conformity determination for a transportation plan, you have to be physically constrained.
Ms. Pumpkin? Yes.
So for those items that are exempt from conformity analysis, is there any process that they have to go through in order to confirm that exempt status through interagency coordination?
We still have to do the interagency coordination, and, let's see. Yes, regardless, if we change the tip, we still have to have the interagency consultation that they can, easily approve, something that's the exempt project. Then there's no reanalysis of the air quality statistics.
Are there any timing considerations in that case, like any public comment or public notice or anything like that? Or is it just as long as the interagency consultation says it's exempted?
Depends on FHWA rules for the tip approval, and I'm not sure. As long as there's, new air quality conformity determination required as a consensus of the interagency consultation, then there's no new public process for conformity, but there may be a new public process for a modified tip.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments from the committee?
Oh, sorry, just a second. We do have a staff member, Yami Alimi with DEC, has his hand raised. Yami, is this related to what we were just talking about?
Yes, I just want to add to what Matt said. The 40 CFR 93105613. Even if the projects are exempt, the conformity analysis waiver decision lies with the interagency consultation committee. So it is the decision of the air conformity interagency consultation committee to decide whether the project is exempt or not, and whether we need to go for public, public review or not.
Thank you.
All right. Any comments from the public?
I go there, just, can you hear me from here?
State your name for the record, please.
I'm Weiser. I'm with Bike Acreage. I wanted to speak a little bit to this. I understand that it's frustrating that we're almost to the end of the project and process, and it feels like, a lot of work has already gone into this. But I do think that most of the changes before us today are things that the public has asked for kind of repeatedly, and they're just finally being seriously considered. Kind of whittle down what we're really prioritizing in terms of things we still want to teach about this. So it's really exciting that there's this consideration of meeting what the community wants and what we think that we want. There's also been a lot of changes and over the course of this year, since the last draft of the tip was released. It's been a really bad year for pedestrian fatalities in Anchorage. And we haven't yet gotten to the point where it's usually the worst every year. As it gets darker, that's when we see the most. So it's just gonna get worse. And that's really scary for all of us. We've also seen rising gas prices. More people are thinking about how can I get around without a car? So these non-motorized improvements are really timing for that. Another thing that we've seen is a shortage of job seekers. So there's a lot of talk and impetus in the community for how can we revitalize the city, really attract people, retain people instead of this kind of slow but steady decline that we've been seeing. And we know from other cities that non-motorized improvements are a really great way to revitalize and get those people here and get them to stay here. So, you know, if there is a little bit of a delay as a result of making these changes, I think it's worth it, especially because it is a 4-year document. So, you know, a few months is pretty small in the grand scheme of that. Thank you for your consideration of these changes, and I look forward to your decision.
Okay, we have another individual, Nancy Pease. I saw your hand raised first. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, if I speak now, will I also be able to speak when you consider the tip itself?
It's up
Are
to the
these two-
committee members. how
Are
they
these
wanna
two
handle
separate
it.
issues?
They are 2 separate items, yes.
All right, then I'll assume that I can be called on for the actual passage of the final tip. So this is regarding the air quality conformity determination. We checked in with Cindy Heil, who obviously was on this board, recently retired ADC air quality employee. And I just read the quote that we got from her. Quote, since Anchorage is a limited maintenance area, our conformity determination is much simpler than most other locations or what we used to have to do prior to 2012. We do not have to model anymore for conformity. All that is required is documentation that the monitors are showing values that meet the criteria, that the plans are fiscally restrained, and that the community is continuing to implement the committed SIP measures. So with that, I think even if some of the projects that you might, or changes you might make in your next vote, it doesn't sound to me as if conformity would be a real, a major undertaking. Thank you.
Next person is Jamin Agosti. Sorry if I got your name wrong. Go ahead. Okay. If we hear from him, we'll come back, but nobody else. Oh. Yemi Alini.
Yeah, I just want to react to what Nancy said. The quote she had from Cindy is very much correct, but the fact remains that the interagency consultation committee needs to sit, and the air conformity determination is necessary per the 40 CFR that I quoted earlier.
Jamin, are you there? He's put in the chat, or they have put in the chat that they're working on their mic, but our comment period is closing soon, so. Okay, we have another person, Ali Hartman.
Hi, yeah, I wasn't prepared to testify, but happy to contribute my thoughts for the public record. My name is Ali Hartman, and I am testifying as a member of the public today, but I also work at City Hall in the Anchorage Assembly Legislative Services team. I just thought that I would share My experience and echo my support for the recommendations for changes put forward by the Assembly. I am somebody who loves to bike around Anchorage, and when I moved here 5 years ago, there was a period well before I was able to ship my car up from the lower 48 where I was biking around town. And I am now expecting my first. And this summer, spent some time biking to work and had many close calls with cars. So, I think that as a young person settling into Anchorage and looking to raise a family here, I think that the long-term plan, should reflect, improvements to multimodal transportation in the city to make it safer for everyone. And I echo what Emily said about it being worthwhile to take some extra time to make sure that this plan reflects the direction that we would like to move forward as a community. So thank you.
Okay, nobody else has their hand up.
Is my microphone working yet?
Is-
This is Jamin.
Okay, oh, thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it. Sorry about that. I just want to again say that I support what Ali mentioned and Emily mentioned. I think taking the time to look at these projects and look at the resolutions passed by the Assembly the other day in regard to the TIP. I'm strongly in favor of that. I think that we really need to look stronger at promoting multimodal and transit-based projects with when we're looking at these TIP projects. And then just have a question for the committee as to what the process is for taking the recommendations that were approved by the Assembly and folding those into the TIP plan, whether it's a line by line or there are specific project amendments or changes as a result of those, the Assembly resolutions that are being considered today.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments?
No more online.
All right. What is the will of the committee?
Move to approve the air quality conformity determination.
Second.
All right. The motion was moved by Ms. Alatin, second by Mr. Trombley. Are there any objections to approving the motion?
I'd like to speak to the motion, if I may.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate learning more about this determination when it applies some of the ins and outs of the process and procedure today. I think that's really helpful. I do think that as we discuss the TIP and as we get public comment, we get public feedback, and it comes before the policy committee for its final approval, that we need to remember that the air quality conformity determination applies, and that while there are certain things that may be brought forward to change the TIP, that we need to probably acknowledge whether or not those are likely exempt projects, although I do understand there has to be an additional consultation to determine that exemption. But in the past, this determination has stood frankly in the way of being able to make policy decisions for as an AMAS policy committee member. It has been, well, we will always have to go back and redo it. And what I learned here today is that it's not necessarily redoing it, it's checking in to see if a waiver applies or if we're otherwise conforming with the determination or if we've changed that. So I just want to provide that perspective about how I view the air quality conformity determination based on what we learned here today as we move through the remainder of our agenda, particularly taking up the TIP. Thank you.
Hey, can I ask some questions or are we kind of?
We've kind of passed. It's already been. Okay.
May are we in debate? Like, can't she ask questions as part of debate or?
It wasn't to debate, I just was going to ask staff some more details around the process and how long it takes for that consultation to take and how involved the write-up is, what the workload. And I don't know the answers to this, but I can find out the answers online.
If I may respond to that.
Hold on.
We're not there.
So, again, okay, just checking back where we, motion was moved, motion was seconded. And I asked just for clarification, are there any objections to approving the motion? There were none, so hearing none, the motion is approved. Moving on to action item 5C, 2023 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Program. Aaron, will you be presenting?
Of course. Hey, everyone, this is the actual tip itself. We've kind of already had plenty of discussion about what this is, but this is AMATS's long-range transport or current transportation plan for the 4 years as outlined in there. The first 4 years of the tip are fiscally constrained. It has been out for public comment. It was taken through interagency consultation process. No comments were received on the air quality conformity determination that you just approved. And now the entire document is before you. I do want to note, in addition, that you probably didn't see last time around, is the self-certification statement in the tip narrative. This is something that AMATS has to do as part of federal requirements as a TMA, where we have to certify that we are following all federal requirements. The self-certification statement in the back outlines what federal requirements we have to follow. And I have backup documentation I will be providing to FHWA, FTA, and DOT regarding that. This self-certification statement is a statement I sign, and then we send to DOT for them to sign. It includes things like, are we following Title VI, so DVE, or other things like that. And that's typically what we as staff do. So it's pretty common for other NPOs throughout the country who have to do this to have not the policy committee sign it, but the actual director, or in my case, the NPO coordinator, sign the self-certification statement. I'm assuming there's probably going to be plenty of discussion on the tip, so I didn't want to ramble on too much longer. So I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
All right. Since we're following our script here, are there questions or comments from the committee? Ms. Altel.
Thank you. Can you remind me what the acronym STBG stands for?
Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. It's the primary funding source that we use for the tip.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Actually, I have a follow-up, if I may, sorry.
Please.
The STBG grant, does it have local match requirements for projects?
Yes, all federal funding does, and to varying degrees, depending on where that funding is coming from. Like, for example, the recently passed legislative bill, the bipartisan infrastructure legislation, had some grant opportunities out there that had a higher match requirement, up to 20%. Our match requirement for the STBG and the CMAQ funding is 9.03%.
Thank you. Sorry, I just have a hard time keeping all of those in my head.
Yes. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a procedural question for you or for staff. Typically, at the assembly, we have to make a motion to approve the actual thing before we amend it. So you have to have it in front of you. Is that how it works here, or do we have to amend it before we move to it?
You would make a motion, so you guys do your questions, then we get public comments, testimony, then we come back to you for you to make a motion, and then you can amend it after you've made the motion.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Polk.
I don't have a question.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Any comments from the public?
If I may, just.
State your name for the record, please.
Oh, yes, Matthew Stitchick, Nathan Health Department, Air Quality Specialist. Just to try to add some clarification on the timing that would be required for changes to the tip. If it's only exempt projects that are being considered for amendment to the tip, the conformity is a very straightforward process. It just requires the time to gather together the agency members and have the consultation, and the result would most likely be that the existing approved conformity determination is still valid. Needs no further approval. However, the portion I can't say for certain, it could be a holdup, is a new public process for the amended tip and that depends on FHWA's transportation planning rules. That, so Leamy is very correct in saying the conformity committee makes the determination on whether the air quality conformity, the air quality consultation group makes the determination on whether the air quality conformity determination stands, but it's possible that just by amending the TIP, you would have to resubmit it for a new public review, and that's important. I don't know what triggers that. But it depends on FHWA's determination of federal transportation planning rules, whether it's a substantial change or not.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the public?
Yes, I'll just go in order of individuals I see. Lizzie Newell.
I'm Lizzie Bull. I live in Independence Park, which is the Abbott Loop Community Council area. And I want to tell you how excited I am to hear about the change with the Scooter Academy connection, with instead of doing a highway underpass, just doing a pedestrian underpass. It really solves a lot of problems. I'm on the Abbott Loop Community Council. I'm not speaking for the council right now, but when we're looking at doing the highway underpass, there's some other costs that are coming up with putting pedestrian sidewalks onto Vanguard and how it'll affect traffic on Brigadier. Also, the intersection of Independence and Abbott, which is a very dangerous intersection. I've been nearly struck by a car there twice while walking. And putting in additional automobile traffic coming through Independence Park, I think will make things more dangerous, and it's going to be expensive. But putting in a bike underpass, bike is wonderful. That means that people in my neighborhood can walk to Raymond. We can walk to the bus station. Oh, it's just great. I'm really excited about putting in a bike underpass. So I would like to encourage you to go that route. And I love how it saves money.
Thank you. Next one is George Donnert.
Well, thank you for this chance to testify. Yeah, I was looking at the tip, and I'm quite concerned about the 92nd Avenue underpass there. The other day, I was driving down New Seward Highway, and it was only 30 seconds between the Diamond underpass to 92nd, and I thought this is that's not going to save people very much time, and I can it is the largest expenditure next year by far. I think the only thing that comes close to it is the kind of the more area-wide maintenance part of the budget. And so I think that the money is the $105,000 million would be much better spent on other projects around the community, especially pedestrian safety. I mean, I live in a street where we get a lot of pedestrian traffic, and yet our sidewalk is only goes for 2 blocks and then ends. And in the wintertime, people have to walk in the street instead of being able to use the sidewalk. So that's just one idea that needs to be, I think, looked at before we add additional underpasses where there's already one in very close proximity. Thank you.
was the only other person with their hand up. Oh. Okay, now people are starting to put their hands up. Okay, next one is Carl Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Carl Jacobs, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony. I'll be brief, as I know you have a full agenda and other folks interested in testifying. I have the privilege of serving on the Anchorage School District School Board. I'm testifying today in support of consideration and review of the TIP in any possible way that we can further the goal of providing safe streets for our community and students and parents and families. We're seeing, due to a transportation staffing shortage, laid bare a problem that I think many in our community have known for quite some time, and that Anchorage is built to prioritize vehicle traffic, and it is exceptionally difficult to navigate certain areas of town. I happen to live on the Muldoon Curve, which is one of the higher area roads, which is high rates of speed, causes numerous and significant accidents. I have been just recently keeping up with the AMATS Policy Committee, and I thank each of you for your work and the dual roles each of the committee members share on behalf of our state and community. And I know that there's numerous dueling priorities. My hope is that if there's reasonable and common sense changes, whether it be looking at the complete streets model or facilitating a study as to what can be done to make other modes of transportation more viable and more safe, that the TIP should include that and be forward thinking as much as possible. I think now's the time for that kind of visionary leadership, and I think there's a good group to consider such changes. And so I'll leave it there. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to testify. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Cheryl.
If I could pass till a little bit later, thank you.
You are the only other one with your hand up, so it is
Okay,
an hour now.
I'll go. Okay, I'll weigh in. I thank you folks for taking all this very seriously, and thank the Assembly for their move to codify a number of the changes the public has been asking for decades, let's put it that way. We have old polling from Anchorage Citizens Coalition where it was a random survey, an expensive poll of voters only. And they said they would much rather invest in improved transit than road expansion. And this is old polling. God knows what it would look like today. You hear the support everywhere for safe walking and biking. And someday we'll put transit on the table. Notice that transit is still not a player at this table. But I wanted to, I'm concerned that, again, the conformity analysis is being raised as a reason not to make changes at this date, which to me seems like a boogeyman in the closet that is raised when needed. When we look at the law, we do not see where any of these changes recommended by the Assembly would require any further in-depth analysis or trigger a problem. Also, in terms of requiring further public participation, the federal code requires, let's see if I've got it here. It's triggered only if the final plan differs significantly from the version that was made available for public comment and raises new material issues that interested parties could not foreseeably have foreseen from the public involvement efforts. So let's keep moving here, please, and let's not raise the specter of unreasonable extensions of timelines as a reason not to take action on this excellent Assembly resolution. Thank you.
Yeah, and that was all that I see online. Oh, wait, we have another person, but we have somebody in the room.
Mr. Welp.
Hi, thanks. So I'm John Weddleton. In a great kindness to the two assembly members on the policy committee, the assembly near unanimously passed this resolution and recommends some changes to the tip. And the items on this aren't new. These are things that we've heard for years from the public. I'd like to address just particularly now is the Vanguard scooter connection. And that's something that, 20 years ago when this project was being scoped and started to be planned, there was huge congestion at Seward Highways and Diamond and Abbott, particularly around Christmas time, and essentially gridlock. And it would look like this project was needed. Since then, there have been substantial changes that have made it no longer needed. The building into Condu Mall drew a huge amount of traffic out of the Diamond Center. I own a business in there, fully aware that the number of people shopping in that mall has plummeted. We also have the growth of the Abbott Town Center. There's a huge number of services there that weren't there 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and 10 years ago. I live nearby and I can get everything I need done in that town center. I don't have to cross the highway. We also have the plan to do the diverging diamond at O'Malley, which can 50% or 100% more traffic through that intersection, which makes it less necessary to do this. They should take pressure off of the Diamond, Abbott, and Seward Highways interchange. So we really don't need this. So what we're hearing is we're locked into it. Well, because we planned it, it's in the plan. If we change it, we have to go through all these hoops and it'll delay everything. And that's very frustrating, that, it's so much money. It's money to build the tunnel. The tunnel should be there. It should be there for pedestrians. And I think anyone at DOT knows we need that because they reinforced the gate to keep people from running across year after year. So the pedestrian thing's absolutely needed. For cars, it's diminished substantially. But you can save the money on the roundabouts. The city's project at $12 to $16 million. That's like half of what we get in a year for city AMATS funds to spend on that. It just isn't needed. So the project's not needed. We should have a mechanism to right-size our projects and we go forward and not spend money on things we don't need anymore. We've already done things to alleviate the traffic. And to say that, well, it has to go back to public comment. You have public comments and respond to public comments, do what the public asks. You have to go back to them again. That has been constantly stated in this process. It simply makes no sense. I recommend that these tip changes be passed. It can go back to the Air Quality Conformity Interagency Committee. I think we'll find out how long that takes. I can't imagine it's that long. And move forward with this. But it just doesn't make sense to be locked into huge, expensive projects we no longer need. Just because that's what we've been doing. Thanks.
Okay, we have another person online, Nancy Pease.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to speak directly to several of the projects that the Assembly is endorsing. First, the study of best policies and practices for greenhouse gas reductions from transportation sources. This will develop a toolkit for AMATS. AMATS staff has no expertise in this area and no time to develop it. AMATS staff promised to pursue this after deferring this issue during the MTP 2040 comment periods. They have not pursued it. They tell us directly that they don't have the time. Second item is expanding the title of the Recreational Trails Plan update to include utilitarian trails. The state agency should have no qualms about this. This is a local issue. AMATS still needs to identify a complete network of pedestrian routes. The non-motorized plan of 2019 that AMATS produced did not provide complete neighborhood level connections for everyday commuting to school, the store, and between neighborhoods. Expanding the title and purpose of this plan will not significantly change the workload for AMATS, but will improve the connectivity and the funding sources for local commuter trails. Third, expanding the title of the non-motorized facility inventory to include undeveloped existing pedestrian easements and rights of way. This is a common sense approach to taking full stock of all the options we have for local connectivity. There's a hidden network of existing platted easements, not new, but existing, that show up on various layers of municipal mapping, but they need to be collected and mapped in one place so that they can be a planning tool. They are an untapped resource. And finally, the case of the 92nd Avenue underpass and the associated collector roads is similar to the Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard project that you just canceled. In both cases, the considerable impacts outweigh the benefits. You have a choice here to avoid expanding vehicular capacity in a location where capacity is not needed. You have a choice to build a direct non-motorized corridor that will be faster, safer, and much more attractive than driving. Deleting the underpass will reduce future emissions and allow infill of the neighborhood commercial center at Abbott in accordance with our land use plans. It will avoid impacts to low-income neighborhoods and the outdoor recreation area. With this project, if it were built, you would put 10,000 vehicles a day, shortcutting through low-income neighborhoods and touring two sides of the children's sports fields. You have a choice of conscience and professionalism to vote for the freeway interchange, taking side with engineers from 25 years ago to build out their vision of more highway lanes converging on the Diamond Center, which is no longer the beating heart of Anchorage retail. Or you can take the side of today's citizens, especially the children and young people, and build a pedestrian bike underpass and show your commitment to the future. Thank you.
Okay, that is all we have for raised hands online. But it looks like we have another person.
State your name for the record.
Hi there, Mark Butler. I'm the Vice President of the North Star Community Council. As a former DOT and PF person, I can state that there's a typo under the Anchorage Cargo and Cold Storage. It's referred to as Ted Stevens International Airport. There is no such place. It's Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport, if you would correct it, please. But the substantial comments are about Fiery Lane, our #1 project that we are interested in having done by the TIP in our community council. It is #1. We're interested in that. I noticed that there is no money for the Fire Lane. There was $44 million after 2026. So that project is pushed way back. I'm hoping that perhaps next year, soon, that will be pushed up the construction dollars in that, and the same with the rest of the construction dollars for the Squidward Road rehab, which is in not final design, but close to final design. So we're eager for those two projects to go ahead. If that means taking an unused suburban road project or under-needed project and putting it into definite high-value roads like these, we would be all in favor of that at North Star Community Council. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
Online.
All right. What is the will of the committee?
I'm to approve the TIP.
Second.
All right, motion was moved by Ms. Alatel, second by Mr. Dunbar. Are there any objections to approving the motion?
Yes, I have a number of amendments I'd like to make.
One at a time, please.
Yes, sir. If you happen to see copies of this, if you happen to have copies of the assembly resolution in front of you, that will help you follow along. I'm going to start with number 3 on the S version of the assembly resolution. And Aaron, whoever's copying them for the record, I hope you have a copy of them. So it's, I move to delete the current project NHS 0004 that contains construction of a vehicular underpass at 92nd Scooter Avenue. And as part of this state transportation improvement plan. I'm gonna break that into number 3 for just FYI. That's the motion.
That's the second. The motion. Do we have a second, Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
May I briefly speak to the motion?
Please, is there any discussion about the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we've heard from the public, we think that this project really creates, first and foremost, a problem for the neighborhood. The cars to pass through and really a vehicular response to a non-motorized issue or pedestrian issue that's trying to be solved really seems to be too much. And really, the too much is expressed in the need for the follow-along project, the Academy Vanguard project. This has been considerable concern for the neighborhood, and I think it's gained community-wide traction. If this project were to go forward, one of the main concerns is the projects aren't in any kind of alignment, that these cars will go into this neighborhood well before, years before the Academy Vanguard project is completed. I guess I need to back up just a tiny bit. Mr. Dunbar and I, with Assemblymember Voland, we took kind of the incredible step of asking the full assembly to weigh in on this tip. We have heard community transportation goals and objectives and desires. And one of the ways that we effectuate those is through the tip. And so this resolution 2022-254S passed 11-1 through the assembly. This amendment was part of that. The conversation has really been about how can we right-size this project. We understand that there have been dollars expended to get this project ready to go. So we're not intending to just leave it as deleted. We would actually want to add it back in with a non-motorized underpass. So the monies spent on this project have not gone to waste. It just right sizes it. And I think it in doing so and not needing the Academy Vanguard project, we are responsive to the public. We also free up money in the tip that is currently slated for Academy Vanguard so we can deal with some other priorities of the community. Thank you.
Certainly, Mr. Trump.
Ms. Zolotel, so if I'm reading the resolution correctly, you're breaking 3 into 3 separate amendments. Am I correct on that? Or 2
Yes,
separate?
it would be 3 separate amendments. The follow-along amendment would be to, if this amendment passes, would be to add a new project that mirrors that project, noting that it is a non-vehicular freeway crossing. And then the last follow-along amendment would be to remove Academy Vanguard.
Okay. Okay, so if you don't mind, I have a few questions for AMATSF because as I read through this, trying to understand AMATS in the process, I'm still learning. So do you mind, I'm going to ask questions as a whole because if one passes, we're going to go in succession. So my question for AMATS staff is, if we vote yes on one and then subsequently yes, are we changing, what's this? Are we changing the definition of the project and can we do that?
Yes, so as it's written here, what this is trying to do is change the description of the project to what it'll do. So instead of having a vehicular underpass, it's a non-motorized underpass. This appears to be trying to go around the limitation that the policy committee has where it cannot edit descriptions of projects that are not AMATS funded. By deleting it,
say that again.
It looks like it's trying to go around the limitation that the policy committee has where they cannot edit the description of a project that is not AMATS funded. As we talked about at the previous meeting, when this came forward for the interagency consultation, AMATS policy committee has 3 options when it comes to adding projects to the TIP outside of the AMATS allocation itself. The first is accepting the project as is. The second is not accepting it or deleting it entirely. And the third is sending a letter, resolution, memo, something to whoever is the main sponsor of the project, letting them know the concerns and asking them to adjust the description of the project. So this third item on here, AMATS cannot do unless it's asking that AMATS add in a project that'll be AMATS funded.
Okay, I understand that. So
because AMATS policy committee doesn't have the authority to tell DOT what to do with its federal funding, just like DOT doesn't have the authority to tell AMATS what to do with its federal funding.
okay, I understand what you're saying. So taking the first amendment where it says delete the current project and has a number, that contains the construction of vehicular underpass. If we remove that, instead of removing it, would it be possible? I'm assuming that you have to remind me what it means, the TAC, the Technical Advisory Commission, right? Committee. could we send these to them? Because I'm assuming, have they seen this?
It has not gone officially, this resolution has not officially gone through the technical advisory committee though.
So can we send it to the Technical Advisory Commission?
Yes, yeah, the policy committee can. But it would have to be after this meeting.
What do you mean after this meeting?
Like
Can we see the project or the resolution?
Well, what I'm wondering is that, a lot of times we don't have the technical expertise, right? So we rely on the technical advisory, and then we make our policy decisions based on that information. If I'm getting a new project and I don't have the technical expertise to understand that project, we have that committee for a reason. So what I'm wondering is that, can we send this in some capacity? Do we have that ability to send it, be like, hey, Technical Advisory Commission, can you please look at this and give us what you think as you look at this holistically with all the different groups that are on the TAC? Can we do that?
Yes.
So we could send this amendment and say, hey, Technical Advisory Committee, could you please look at what it would mean to delete the vehicular underpass at 92nd Scooter? We could ask them to look at that.
Yeah, the problem is that would delay approval of the TIF, which we run into significant issues with. So the TIF needs to be approved today to stay on schedule.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I think staff is providing a lot of commentary that isn't just in direct response to the questions. I understand, we've talked about the procedure, but I don't think necessarily that AMAT staff's opinion about, these are policy decisions. So I'm having some problems with that today.
So I guess if it's not your opinion, just no conjecture, no opinion from AMAT staff. I'm wondering about the AMAT process. Could we add these projects in or take them out as we want as a public process? Is that possible to take them out, move new ones in that haven't been through the TAC? Can we do that? It sounds like we're already changing the project description, which you said legally we can't change a project description, correct?
For these type of projects, no, that are outside the AMAT's allocation.
And that's in writing and code, or not code, but law,
It's
federal law.
part of the 3C process. So we'd have to, FHWA would have to weigh in exactly. I've already asked them about it. Can AMAT's policy committee make that change? And they said that as part of the 3C process, you work with DOT to develop these descriptions to be included in the TIP.
You hear from the public, and I understand that over time, projects change, things change. If the project is valid, and I'm sympathetic to a project being valid or being changed, I understand that. Is it possible to put it in the TIP and then at a later date, send something like this to the Technical Advisory Commission, and then as we vote on the new TIP next year or the following years, to take something out? Is that possible? Or is it once it's in there, that's it?
It can be taken out at a later date, yes.
So, can I, Chairman?
Please.
So continuing on, Meg, if you wouldn't mind, I guess, would you be open to sending them to a motion to send this, not just what you said, but the entire number 3 to the Technical Advisory Commission?
I think it's a really great idea. However, this in the STIP right now it's an underway project. It's 2023. I believe UC means under construction, and $105 million slated to go, as soon as, 23, I believe starts October 1 for the state, October 1 of this year.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure we have the time for that because the project could kick off as soon as October 1.
What does that look like for the project kickoff? I have a hard time believing they're gonna go with bulldozers in October. And is there a NEPA process? Oh,
Mr. Baskey, can you please provide some assistance?
Sean Baskey, the head of the design section for the Department of Transportation. So as far as the current schedule on the Seward Highway O'Malley to Diamond project, it's currently, the outlook is for certification, so development of all of the plans, the utility agreements, completion of all of the right-of-way acquisition. We're nearly 99.9% complete on all of the right-of-way acquisition. All of that looks like will be done somewhere around April of next year and be ready to certify it. So not on-ground construction until later in the summer of 23.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Thank you, Mr. Baskey. For the right-of-way acquisition, would that be significantly impacted or changed if the type of underpass was changed?
So it would depend upon, you know, a number of different things. So right now, the highway is slated to go over, right? The existing topography to the west and to the east aren't at the same height. We would certainly have to use a lot of the right-of-way that we already acquired from the soccer fields from the private property there. So we would unlikely need additional right-of-way, but we would probably need a lot of what we already acquired.
Okay, thank you. So I might alter my response to Mr. Trombley's question slightly, if I might. So I'm not necessarily opposed to what you're suggesting if we can time limit it. It looks like we have, because we can always bring in an amendment to the tip. So if we time limited it so that we were kind of done with that review and in this position to maybe make a more informed decision before the end of the year, I could possibly agree to that. So that seems to me to be possibly the middle ground here.
Mr. Duncan.
Yeah, I guess I have a question for staff, but I guess my concern is there are several amendments that the assembly passed that require funding, and we are fiscally constrained. And so I'm wondering what the impact would be of Mr. Trombley's suggestion of sort of keeping, maybe I'm understanding what you're saying. I think you're saying keep that project in there and then go talk to the state about changing it. But if that's the case, then it seems to me we haven't freed up the money for the other amendments. Is that a fair interpretation?
Even deleting the project does not free up money for AMAS to use. It's a state-funded project, and so that's DOT's federal funding, not AMAS's.
Okay, so the rest of the amendments, regardless of whether you feel they are useful or not, is not contingent upon what we do here.
For this one project, no, they are not.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Mr. Chair?
Please.
So what's the impact of, rather than leaving this project in there in this form and asking the state to change it, what would be the impact of deleting it now and then going to the state and saying, give us an altered version of this project? Or asking, would you like to put back in an altered version of this project?
I think it would be up to the state to answer the impacts, because I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at that one. So the major issue that we have right now with that, if you delete the project in its entirety, is we currently are under a new process where we develop criteria similar to MPO, NTP, and score and rank projects based on the category of projects in which they are. Right now, we have not even developed a criteria yet for what we consider expansion or modernization projects, which this project would fall under one of those two categories. The only project criteria we have is for steady repair, which is basically pavement rehabilitation stuff. So we're months away from even developing a criteria before it even would be considered as a project, number one. Number two, the state would have to then provide a project, a replacement project, if we deemed it a reasonable replacement project, and then take it to the state at an opportunity to score it. And then we would have to rely upon whether or not there's funding. We currently, with the latest governor's initiative, which we obviously support, just dropped about $1 billion into the fiscal plan. And so the money for the next however many years, we get $650 million a year. So on top of our program that we currently have, we're in the outer years before considering any additional new projects, let alone developing criteria to even accept criteria to score additional new projects.
Can I ask a follow-up question then?
Sure.
How did this project get in here if you don't have criteria for scoring projects?
It's been around for 20 years. So, yeah. Cool. It was prior to this whole concept about developing criteria is brand new. And before, there was a different process prior to this. Mr. Trump.
Going back to Ms. Zolotel's question about, or statement about a timeline, can we put a timeline on, going back to if I'm understanding you correctly, is getting an answer to them getting an answer back to us before the end of the year? Is it possible to send this to the technical advisory committee and get an answer before the end of the year?
Yeah, we can make it available to the next technical advisory committee that's in 2-3 weeks, the first one in September, and we'd have an answer by your guys' next policy committee meeting.
Okay. Sounds good.
Mr. Dunbar.
So what is the impact of delaying the tip to our next advisory committee meeting so we can hear that answer before we pass the tip?
Yeah, I'm gonna pass out again. Freak out. So there are a lot of impacts because if we don't approve the tip until next month or later, it delays when FHWA FTA can approve the tip. So if we wait until next month, for example, to approve the tip, FHW and FTA won't have the opportunity to approve the air quality conformity determination side of things until sometime in October. So we've missed our deadline because we have to get this done by before the end of the fiscal year, because our current tip ends at the end of FY22. So that impacts project starts. Projects can't start until the tip air quality is approved. New phases can't start. And that could lead to a compounding effect that happens where this phase wasn't started, so the next phase is late in starting, or money is lost because we weren't able to obligate it in time. Additionally, just as a reminder, our last certification review had a corrective action on there because we missed the deadline for our MTP. And FHWA wants to ensure that we are making steps to getting our plans approved on time. Not just by the policy committee, but also by FHWA on their side of things.
So one
Yeah.
It's not yet.
Still discussion among the committee. Any other discussion, questions, or debate among the committee? On this amendment.
One quick statement, if I may, Mr. Chair. I want to go ahead and keep the amendment on the table. If there's a subsequent amendment, should my amendment fail, I would consider it for the bracketing of the timing. I heard the feedback that this feels like it's trying to do a line item change. I think it's more than a line item change. I think it substantially alters the type of project. Having a a non-motorized, I've got to get my verbiage down here, a non-motorized underpass versus a vehicular underpass. I think those are two separate and distinct types of projects. I do think there's some utility in using what's already occurred for 92nd and Scooter in doing what I believe to be a replacement project. So at this point, if the advice from staff is the way that I have the amendment set up in the resolution would not be allowed, then I will not bring the replacement project amendment and just simply move to delete this one, and that will be that. That's where I'm at with it. So I would like to go ahead and vote on this amendment as presented.
Mr. Trombley.
No. Other motion always seems to be stuck.
All right. Point, Aaron, do I have open discussion for amendments to?
That's all closed. It's all
Didn't
with
think
the
so.
committee
Thank
now.
All right, with that,
Right.
we are ready to vote on amendment 1, which is delete the underpass in this project of 92nd. We'll do a roll vote. Mrs. Altel,
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Mr. Trombley,
No.
Ms. Spoken. My vote is no. The amendment fails.
I have a couple more amendments, Mr. Chair, but may I ask staff a question before I bring my next amendment? In the tip, Aaron, there is, for project, on page, is it on page? Anyway, it's the AMAX interim 2050 MTP update. I see there's CRISA funding for $400,000. Can you remind me what that's meant to do and why we're using CRISA funding for the MTP?
It is to start the next update of the MTP, because that'll have to start as soon as the current one is done.
Follow-along question, please. Don't we typically have other funding other than one-time funding to work on the MTP?
Yes, the reason CRISA funding is shown is because CRISA is non-match. The last time for the 2050 MTP, it took us about 6 or 7 months to get the match in place. And so it caused a delay. So this effort was to try and eliminate the match need.
And does that match come from the MOA or from other funding sources?
It's a split match, half MOA, half DOT, and the delay was on DOT's end because they didn't want to pay it.
Okay, so I'm gonna go off script. I move to delete the AMAX interim 2050 MTP update from the tip.
Sorry, this is amendment 2, or is this a
Yeah,
whole
this will be new amendment.
new amendment to the original motion?
What page were you on?
Yeah.
Second.
What table were you on?
I am on table 4, plans and studies.
And which one? were you doing?
AMAX interim 2050 MTP update. I want to delete actually, I don't want to delete the entire thing. I apologize. I want to delete the CRISA funding at 400. I guess, or does it mean the whole thing goes because the other one's estimated funding in the future?
Sorry, could you repeat
I'm
that?
just gonna show you
Because
because.
you want to remove the CRISA funding and replace it with something else?
Yeah, so do the-
Yeah, I see it. What is Chris, what is that stand for?
I need a narrower amendment.
So if we remove the funding, we essentially remove the project. So we would have to replace it with STBG funding.
Nope, I'm not doing that either. So yeah, remove the project, please.
So to restate the amendment, we have an amendment to remove the AMAX interim 2050 MTP update. Is that correct?
Yeah, may I speak to the motion?
Please, discussion,
you.
please.
So this amendment is, the municipal match will be $200,000. And looking at the budget forecast for the municipality, the $200,000 can definitely be picked up through a different funding source than this CRISA funding. This CRISA funding is really a unique opportunity. And I think what is really important to me in our other amendments is the AC corridor study. $400,000 is enough to at least get going on that. The other corridor studies are about $700,000, but it feels like the AC corridor studies are the ones missing to complete the package on the corridor studies. So that's my intention would be then to move to add the ANC corridor studies using this fund source. Thank you.
Mr. Trombley.
I always like to know, can you help me understand what deleting staff, what does deleting this do? Is it, does it have a collateral damage somewhere else, or is it fine?
The NTP update is required federally for us to do every 4 years. So that's what this in here is doing that required 4-year update. And historically, it's been funded out of the TIP.
Yeah.
And if there are other funding sources available for it, That'd be nice, but in the past that has not materialized, and this is a critical project that we must do every 4 years.
Where do we usually, where do we usually get the funding from, you said, the TIP?
The tip funding.
So why can we not do it now?
The STBG allocation funding, you mean? Because there was CRISA funding available, and with the impacts last time that the match had on delaying that project and causing us to basically be last minute, never having any room to do anything, we thought it'd be easier to have no match required and get that project moving faster.
So this doesn't require a match, this funding?
Correct.
If we use the TIP funding, it requires a match.
Correct.
And the match is a percentage?
9.03% of the total.
Which usually runs cost-wise.
So the current MTP was about $800,000.
So 9% of 800,000.
Yeah,
80.
and then that amount was split between the municipality of Anchorage and DOT. So about 40,000 for each display.
Where?
Do
So-
you want me to speak again?
Yeah,
Where I
actually, I'd
was
like-
Proposing the funding.
Yeah, I'd like to know where we would get the
So, yeah,
funding
at
from.
for the MOA side, the last budget and finance committee meeting, we see that vehicular rental tax is well above expectations in addition to our portion of room taxes. We just are really doing well fiscally from the MOA on versus the projection. So finding this amount of money moving into the end of the year and actually this was for our 2024 spend. Moving into 2024 should not be a problem to commit for the MOA. And I believe we came up with a calculation of about $40,000, so definitely doable.
Yes, sir. So I'd be likely to support it if we were able to somehow put on the record that the funding was gonna come from another location. So that it was at least part of the amendment that the funding was gonna come from the vehicle tax or something, because before we just remove it, we need to identify a funding source since this is required.
So the best we can do is say that we will attempt to add it to the budget in 2023, so that it goes to AMATs. But as you know, the assembly, we are only 2 representatives here on this body, and then we'll have to go through the 12-member body. It'll also be something that a department could bring forward as part of its budget in for the MOA, particularly the department and the departments that are around in planning or a part of AMATs. I mean, AMATs is, kind of, it's separate, but it's contained within kind of certain portions of the infrastructure of the MOA.
As you're well aware, budgets can become highly political, so my concern is the guarantee.
Also, no, it's not till 2024.
I guess that kind of makes it even less of a guarantee.
Oh, I actually think the opposite way, but okay.
It's just that I'd hate to be in a position where we don't have the match. If we could identify that and put it in there, it'd be more reliable.
I just want to clarify, so the 40,000 would be matched to federal funding, so you'd still have to identify the federal funding in the tip and show it in here. So if you remove the project entirely, there is no project in the tip, there is no federal funding for that match to be used for.
And that's federally required to do that project, so we almost can't delete it. Well, you can, but then we won't do it, and then we'll get dinged in some capacity by the feds, right?
Yeah, because if you don't have an approved MTP, you don't have transportation projects. The MTP is one of the core projects, just like the TIP, that we have to do.
One last statement on that, if I may. So we can always amend the tip if we free up other money in the tip to use I get the acronym wrong, you guys are fast. STBG funds, but we haven't freed any money up for that purpose yet. Right now, we are fully fiscally constrained on that amount of funding. One of the places that could be freed up would be Academy Vanguard. I think that likely might be coming. Also, as projects fall off the tip, as happens from time to time, that could also free up the funding for this purpose. Noting that there's still $1 million in estimated need for the MTP after 2026. this is a small piece of the overall project.
Mr. Dunbar, you have a question?
No, I think this discussion, I'll just note that to put a firmer number on it, $9 million, we have $9 million of additional rental car tax, which will hopefully cover fuel costs. And this would be a drop in the bucket compared to that.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on the amendment to,
Who was the second on the amendment for this, Mr. Dunbar? Okay, thank you. We're just clarifying.
any more discussion on the amendment to remove the interim 2050 FUP 400K Carissa Lane? All right. Debate is over. We will take a vote. Mrs. Altel,
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Mr. Trombley?
No.
Sorry, I misspoken.
No.
Vote is no. The amendment fails.
I have two more amendments, Mr. Chair.
Your next amendment, please.
All right, on that same page, so you didn't have to switch pages, toward the end of that page. I moved to change the project description of the trails inventory at PLN 00019 to include non-motorized easements, pedestrian right-of-ways, and undeveloped right-of-ways. To the inventory collected.
I'm sorry. One more time, please.
Sure, so I moved to amend the non-motorized facilities inventory and mapping project so that the project would include an inventory of the non-motorized easements, pedestrian right-of-ways, and undeveloped right-of-ways, in addition to non-motorized facilities within the AMATS area. There's an A missing in that description, by the way.
I caught it. Thank you.
All right, any discussion on this amendment?
Second.
Sorry, getting ahead of you. Thank you, Mr. One for a second.
Yeah, briefly, Mr. Chair, we talked about this at the work session we had. We understand that adding this would be work. It's my understanding as well, there's an MOA existing GIS that could be utilized for this purpose to add it to the plan. The idea here is to collect all of this information in one place, and we believe AMATS is best suited as it is a little bit arm's length from how those right-of-ways, easements, and pedestrian right-of-ways, undeveloped right-of-ways, and non-motorized easements may be utilized, and the policy around them, which would likely be controlled by the MOA. Thank you.
Mr. Trombley.
Excuse me, you and I, Meg, I just write down notes as I see these things. Has the TAC seen this?
No, this resolution that's brought forward did not go to the technical advisory committee.
So it's a new project, then,
It's a change to an existing project.
so for staff, is this, there's a precedent for changing or adding, what is the term you used? Changing the description of a project?
Yep.
For changing the description of a project without going through the TAC, there is precedent for that?
Yeah, this is a doable act by the policy committee and is on an exempt project, so there's no air quality conformity concerns in that regard.
So there's no challenge with this, it doesn't bind us in any capacity?
From my standpoint as the coordinator, I see no issue with this change.
Is it a last one? some of this all tell the, can you just help me understand the reasoning why you want to expand? Because right now it says project would inventory the non-motorized facilities. You're expanding it to pedestrian right of way, non-motorized easements. Just could you help me understand why you want to do that?
Sure. So there are a number of right-of-ways and easements that aren't traditionally captured in our non-motorized plan that can really ensure connectivity amongst neighborhoods. A lot of them just are unknown. Often they aren't known, and I learned this actually from Member Cross at the work session until an as-built survey is often done. But we do have a GIS layer within the MOA, so it'd be nice to inventory them, and then we would be able to have discussions, particularly around district plans, utilizing the non-motorized plan to see what connectivity we may want, those neighborhoods may want to establish within their neighborhoods.
I understand. Okay.
Thank you. Any other discussion on Amendment 3? All right. At this time, we'll take a vote on the amendment only. Ms. Aladell?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Spoken?
Yes.
The motion passes. The amendment passes.
The next amendment I have, Mr. Chair, is to add a 5th and 6th Avenue signalization project listed in the 4th year of the TIP.
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion on this amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, we talked about this before, and we didn't get clarification on whether or not a 4th year project could be added to the TIP. But the idea here is this prioritizes this project should something fall off the TIP. And I think given actually recent events, safety around signalization and lighting is really important, particularly for this corridor. So while we don't have existing funding because we are fiscally constrained, stating that this is a priority should funding become available, I think is the right policy call to make. Thank you.
Mr. Trombley?
So my understanding is that this project has been scored in the past.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And it was removed. Why was it removed?
It was originally removed due to funding limitations and constraint concerns, that it was gonna cost more than we had available at the time. That's all I had.
That's all. So since it was scored and then it was removed, does it need to go back to be scored again, or does that scoring sustain in perpetuity?
It sustains. It wouldn't need to be rescored again.
Do we know the cost of this?
Thank you. So we have some comparative projects. 3rd Avenue is listed on the roadway table, as is East 4th Avenue signal and lighting upgrade. And I apologize, my amendment should have said 5th and 6th signal and lighting upgrade just for conformity's sake. And those are some are in the 5 million for the one, and the other is in the overall 10 million range, but it's broken up and phased.
And help me through the process. Since it's in the 4th year, that means we are fiscally constrained to the project like we have identified a funding source. Is that kind of like your wish list?
It's like a wish list, but that it's a really, really high priority, because it did fall off, but it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, just quick clarification. The 4th year of the TIP is actually a fiscally constrained year, so you would need to identify a funding source. It would be beyond the 4th year, so 5th, just clarification, it would be beyond the 4th year if you want to, and it'd be an illustrative list of projects that the committee could recommend and say, this is our next priority if funding comes available.
Thank you, what he said.
So then the motion should be the 5th
5th
year?
year, sorry. I
5th or beyond, however you want to frame
I
it.
Yeah,
understand that.
I
Okay.
took the calculation of 2023 to 2026 too literally.
Got it. Okay.
are we doing a friendly amendment to change the language to beyond the 5th year?
In honor of Robert's rules, there's no such thing as a friendly.
Well, but the mover and the seconder agree.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Fifth year.
That's right.
5th year
Sorry,
it is.
thanks for the correction.
Right. Is there any other discussion on this amendment? All right, we will take a vote on the amendment to add a Fifth and Sixth Avenue signal and lighting project to the 5th year of the TIP. Ms. Altel,
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Mr. Trombley,
Yes.
Ms. Bogan.
Yes.
The amendment passes.
Thanks. So Mr. Dunbar reminded me, I missed one. So my apologies. So this is on the Fireweed Lane Rehabilitation Project, just so we can all find it together. It is this on the second page. I moved to amend the project description so that it reads, in the second line, changing Fireweed from 4 lanes to a maximum 3 lanes. And then the project description continues.
I'll second it. Can I ask a question about it?
Discussion on this amendment?
Unless you want to go first.
Nope, that one speaks mostly for itself.
No, it does make sense. Just curious, are we changing a project description by any chance, or is this a typical, can we do, what we are?
This is a project description change, and I believe it would be no problem to make this change. I was intending on bringing this forward as an amendment to the TIF later anyway, so thank you for helping with that.
Financially, does this change what's in the line item?
No, this would not change anything financially.
Okay.
What this does is give more flexibility for the project to be able to look at other options besides just the 3 lane and the Fireweed lane. So maybe the center turn lane's not needed or other things like that, just as an example from my discussion with DOT.
Okay.
Any other discussion on this amendment? Very well. We will vote on Amendment 5, changing the project description of the Fireweed project from 4 lanes to a maximum of 3 lanes. Ms. Altel,
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Mr. Trombley,
Yes.
Bogan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Very last one, I promise. So this would be an addition. Hold on a second. All right, I'm gonna make this amendment, and then I might be told I can't do it. So it's to add a project, so I moved to add a project, it says a greenhouse gas emission reduction plan. And the description would be, that, is a database plan that directly targets current and future Anchorage greenhouse gas emissions and quantitatively evaluates strategies and actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from within AMATs.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion on this amendment?
So I have a question for staff to make sure this is a valid amendment. I have to have funding for that, right?
You could put it in the 5th year. If additional funding comes available soon, it could be moved in. I just want to give you a heads up, as part of the future amendment I was looking at doing is trying to make a recommendation that's a little more encompassing this, to do a climate action plan for Anchorage that would incorporate these kind of things, as well as add a resiliency piece to it, because that's one of the things that we've been working on, is trying to incorporate resiliency more into our planning process.
Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you. question for staff, would putting this amendment in the fifth year hamper your efforts to do so?
Mr. Trumbull.
Yeah. Help me understand the correlation between this and in the whereas section of the amendment, we talk about the Anchorage Climate Action Plan. Is that on top of the Anchorage Climate Action Plan, or does that substitute for it?
Thanks for the question. So the Climate Action Plan sets targets, but it doesn't actually set ways to go about doing it or measuring it. So the Climate Action Plan is a policy document that doesn't necessarily have the tools and pieces to determine if we're meeting those policy goals.
This provides that
Yes.
data-driven.
Yes.
Okay, understand.
Yes, Ms. Elto.
So I have an alternate route to kind of get to where I think we want to go, which is why don't I, if this is okay, work with you, Aaron, on coming up with a comprehensive TIP amendment where we also involve the Climate Action Plan Coordinator, Sheena Kilcoyne, to come up with something, cost it, and then work through how we can look at doing a TIP amendment, and I understand there's always a lot going on, but trying to prioritize that in the next 60 to 90 days. And then seeing what funding may or may not come available. I really want that work to coincide, should there be an additional amendment from Mr. Trombley. I don't know if there will be, to refer that DOT project onto the TAC.
Yeah. My plan was to start an amendment as soon as this TIP was approved.
So it looks like our timing would align.
You just got there before.
Okay. With that, I'll withdraw the amendment, and you guys can all look forward to another amendment at a later date, in coordination with Aaron and with staff. If the second will agree.
Second agrees.
Thank you. Then it is withdrawn. Are there any additional amendments to this motion?
No, since it's been withdrawn. No, that's fine. Can I ask another question? Is it too late? Oh, no, it is too late. Never mind. Answer my own question. Okay.
All right.
Actually, no, that's not entirely true. Let me ask it this way. I hear from the community the desire to have that pedestrian connectivity with 92nd Vanguard. I'm assuming when that is built, there will be pedestrian facilities. Will the road itself have bike lanes? Will there be a pedestrian friendly component to it? Or will it just be a road? I'm assuming there'll be sidewalks.
On both sides. Sorry.
Mr. Baskey is left, but it's my understanding that Mr. Boland, could you address that, please?
Yeah, Luke Boland, DOT pre-construction engineer. So the plan is to have bike competitive improvements. I don't know to what extent on that 92nd extension, but one of the things that I've been listening to as we've been following the actions by the assembly, and the discussion here is to pull together that information, pull together the justification for both the pedestrian and the vehicular improvement for that part of the project.
That was my understanding as well. Yes, sir.
So if I understand you correctly, when you go through that design process, you'll talk to community councils, you'll talk to the assembly about how those pedestrian facilities look and how that flows. Is that how I understand it?
So as Mr. Baskey stated earlier, a lot of that's already been done today.
It's already
We're wrapping up utility agreements, we're wrapping up right away, and proceeding with final design on this. We have done a good amount of public outreach as part of our NEPA process. We are required to look at multimodal, all forms of all modes of transit.
So is it too late for someone to get involved, like the policy committee, to say, hey, again, just hypothetically speaking, we would like not just sidewalks, but we also would like pedestrian overpass or something? Is it too late for that?
It would be a change in design at this point. It would be a massive one, but I think discussing that with DOT would be a better avenue than here today trying to make scope changes to a DOT project that is included in the TIP because it's federally funded. And so I think more discussion is warranted on.
Sure. Okay, thanks. Mr. Dunbar.
Yeah, I'm still confused as to where we ended up with that project. That is to say, we didn't delete it, and I don't think we actually amended the language at all. So what exactly is going to happen on that project after this? So I think Mr. Trombley indicated a desire to see it go back to the TAC and for them to evaluate making it a pedestrian-only facility. And my understanding is we can still amend and delete this project at a later date. Is that right?
You can delete it at a later date, yes.
And if the state agrees, the state could come to us and we could work together to change the scope of the project. Is that right?
It would have to be changed. So basically what you do is for these kind of projects, you get it changed in the STIP, and then it translates down into the TIP and adjusts to whatever the description is in the STIP.
And so if we vote on this TIP today, what is the next step that's going to happen on this project?
For the Seward Highway project, you mean?
The 92nd Vanguard.
I'd have to talk to Luke Boland as to, basically what Sean Baskey mentioned.
Yeah, what Sean Baskey said earlier,
Yeah.
which is it would proceed in accordance with what he mentioned. Refresh the committee, if you would, Luke, the status of how that project would proceed.
So at this point, project's proceeding with final right-of-way actions. So that I've already addressed at this point, final utility agreements for impacts related to the project and finalizing the design. Baskey said that we were going to be looking at obligating funds in likely April timeframe at this point. So there's time between now and then to have further discussions on this.
As a follow-up.
Yes.
Can we direct the TAC to take something like this up? I mean, I think that's our intent. That was what I understood our intent to be, is we're going to leave this project in, but we want the TAC to look at making the changes that the community has expressed they desire, or parts of the community have expressed they desire. Can we do that? I guess this is a question for you, Aaron, or whomever else. What authority does the policy committee have to direct the technical advisory committee?
Sorry, can you restate that? I was checking because somebody messaged me that said something in chat that I hadn't read, and I was trying to make sure we didn't miss any members of the public. Can you restate that, please?
So if our desire is to have this go back to the TAC, how do we effectuate that?
Make a motion today and say, please send this back to the amendment. You could say, please send it back to the TIP for or the TAC for consideration of future amendment to the TIP. Making it, deleting this project or working with DOT to get a project description change in the STIP, something like that.
So moved.
Because then that would come through and
Second.
we'd work with the technical advisory committee to reach out to DOT based on comments that you guys have made forward, brought today and said, there's been concerns expressed on this project. We need to sit down and talk about this and see what can be done.
Mr. Chairman. Discussion on this amendment? Yes, Mr. Conley.
Okay, so if we, from a process standpoint, we approve the TIP, but we make an amendment to send the project to the TAC. That doesn't delay the TIP, correct?
Correct.
So that way the technical advisory commission or committee can then work with DOT to say, how can we adjust this to make it pedestrian friendly, to ensure that it is pedestrian friendly as well as whatever they come up with. But we're at the point now where if it was to become pedestrian only, the state DOT would have to agree to change it in this STIP.
Correct.
And if they don't agree to change it in the STIP, then it is what it is.
Correct.
But we can still be involved in the design aspect of it as far as making a pedestrian overpass or 8-foot bike lanes or whatever the case is.
According to the 3C process, yes.
So I made an amend, a motion for an amendment and Zaltel changed it, or I'm sorry, seconded it. But I just want to double check with staff that they, sort of know where it goes and what it looks like.
I believe I understand, if I understand correctly, and please make sure I'm correct, is to take the Seward Highway Project, NHS 0004, I believe, to the Technical Advisory Committee and discuss with them what has been discussed here today about working with DOT to change the project, the 92nd Avenue underpass portion, to see if it can be made more pedestrian friendly, either through changing it to a non-motorized facility only, or adding a pedestrian overpass, or something else to that effect. If there are specific language you want me to use, I would need you to have that outlined for me, please.
Yeah, so the specific language, if you don't mind, Mr. Dunbar, would be to evaluate the feasibility and impacts of only including a non-motorized underpass at 92nd and Scooter and getting rid of the vehicular underpass.
Okay.
I think that's the technical advice. I know I'm looking for to see what that does. And then can we time constrain that to recommendations no later than the November policy committee meeting?
I guess that would depend on how much DOT, how much effort they would need. I would bring this to the next technical advisory committee in September to let them know this, but then we'd have to work with DOT, and I don't know how much time they need to make the evaluation.
No, I meant for TAC to, like, how about it's TAC update no later than the PC meeting in November, like wherever it's at, like we're
Okay.
still working on it, we're whatever, but because we have the April timeline in 23, I think it's important to keep getting updates about it and kind of put some timelines on that process.
Mr. Dunbar.
Question, for staff. For my knowledge and for the public, is the public able to participate in the technical advisory committee meetings the way they are the policy committee meetings?
Yes, sir. As long as it's an action item, which this would be an action item, I would bring it forward as an action item based on your guys' recommendations. And the public will be given opportunities to provide their testimony, just like today.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move to extend the meeting 15 minutes.
Second.
Thank you.
So I have one follow-up question to that, Mr. Chairman. For DOT, does moving it there, does that delay your project timelines where you're at right now? If we do that, does that make you stop doing what you're currently doing?
So what I'm hearing right now is we're looking at an update resolution that we're getting out of the assembly. We would like to pull together the information that we've got in terms of justification for both vehicular and bike improvement. And have that discussion. Depending on the direction of those discussions, the project may proceed and obligate in April as planned. If there are scope changes, like going for switching the scope of the project to a pedestrian only crossing there under New Seward, then that would be a delay to the project schedule.
Mr. Dunbar.
Potentially significant savings to the taxpayer. Actually, it's just because I have members from DOT here, and I probably won't make it to the technical advisory committee meeting, unfortunately. Has DOT ever converted a vehicular project to a purely non-motorized project?
My knowledge.
I'm sorry. What question?
Oh, I guess you're in DOT too. In its history, has the Alaska DOT ever converted a motorized project to a non-vehicular project? To your knowledge?
Not that I'm aware of.
And I think in this situation too, we would still retain the highway improvements along New Seward, so it would be a change to a portion of the project.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I apologize, but yes.
Any additional discussion on this amendment 7 only?
History.
Can you Can you restate it so I remember the exact language of this
Aaron
amendment?
said a ton of it.
Oh, I wrote it down. Let's see if I got it. So send the Seward Highway NHS 0004 project to evaluate the feasibility and impacts of only including a non-motorized underpass at 92nd Avenue and Scooter and not have a vehicular underpass. And then have TAC update by November, or where they at in the process.
With the understanding that regardless of what they come back with, the state doesn't want to take it out of their step, and it is what it is right
There's this thing called legislative advocacy.
All right. Any additional discussion on this amendment 7 only? Very well, we will vote on amendment 7, which, as Aaron just stated, I'm not going to decide on. Ms. Altel,
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Mr. Trombley.
Yes.
Ms. Bogan,
Yes.
the amendment 7 passes. All right. Any additional amendments on the original motion?
Well, actually, I have one question. It was mentioned that the Anchorage International Airport was mentioned wrong in there. Does that matter? Should we amend it so that the,
That's a technical, we can correct it.
Okay.
Christine, we've caught a few errors as we put it out today, we'll correct.
All right, so that puts us back to voting on action item 5C, Transportation Improvement Program, 2023 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Program with multiple amendments.
Can I speak to the amended tip really quickly? I know we're short on time.
Ms. Hill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm happy with the amendments that did move today. I think this illustrates a couple of things. One is Anchorage really needs to find a way to develop a long-range transportation plan for itself. That can be a plan that's really considered in the overall planning of these projects. I think right now we're running into this bit of chicken and egg problem because a lot of the TIP effectuates what's in the MTP. And the MTP frankly is Anchorage's only long-range transportation plan at the moment. And I don't believe it reflects community priorities in the way we're hearing about them. So there's nothing we can do about that in AMATS, but I think that would possibly relieve some of the tension between AMATS, the AMATS tip, doing this tip, this process, and kind of what we're hearing as policymakers for the municipality. Thank you.
With that, we will take a vote on action item 5C. Ms. Altel,
No.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Mr. Trombley,
yes.
Ms. Bogan.
Yeah.
The motion, I'm sorry, item 5C passes. Aaron, any other action items?
There are no other action items, no.
I'll make a motion. Are we going to, we have 5 minutes left.
We do have a number of items, but unfortunately they are presentations that will take a little while to do. So I recommend we delay them until next month. And we can bring them back. I apologize for those who were here for those presentations, but it was a lengthy discussion today.
Need a motion and the agenda.
Move to amend the agenda items 6, A, B, and C to the next policy committee on September 22nd, 2022.
Thank you. All right, we will quickly, are there any comments? Agenda item 9, are there any additional public comments?
We did receive 2 public comments that are related to an item that was not on our agenda. It was the Assembly Resolution 2022-254. The actual Assembly Resolution was not on the agenda, but we do have 2 items or 2 comments that were submitted by the public. We don't normally get generic comments in, so I'm not sure how to handle this. My thought was to read them into the record, but we are limited time. So I guess I look to the committee. How would you like me to handle these comments we received? Would you like me to just go ahead and quickly read them into the record? Okay, I will do that very quickly. The first is from Cameron Cole. Good afternoon. I'm writing you to signal my support for AR 2022-254 and encourage you to do the same. Transportation is fundamental to a community and its environment. I believe these measures can improve our municipality by diversifying and making safe, varied modes of transportation, while also reducing congestion and greenhouse gas emissions. Please support this study today, or this study of best practices in today's meeting to ensure we tread and drive and ride in the best path in the future. Next one is from Bill Herman. He apologized he was unable to make it today as he had a conflicting meeting. I cannot testify in person at your meeting today, but would like to offer written testimony to today's considerations. Your effort is to do comprehensive planning for the future. A futuristic plan must include adapting to increasing problems due to human-caused climate change. That change, scientists says, is increasing global warming in our region by more than 2 times that of the rest of the world. Creating an urban anchorage that is more people-friendly and better for the environment, not by constructing larger freeways, is where we should be headed. I therefore support AR 2022-254 from the Anchorage Assembly that asks your committee to strengthen bike and pedestrian improvements with trails and pedestrian-friendly roads. And I especially support full funding for greenhouse gas emission measurement and reduction in transportation system. We need to become results-oriented about climate change, and measuring and setting reduced targets for emissions is a very critical component. Thank you. That was all I had.
Thank you, Aaron. Agenda item 10, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Sorry. Meeting is adjourned, sorry. Objections to adjourning. Meeting is adjourned.